Hey, it's Robert, and you're watching Sidestep Adventures. I'm out here in the woods with Brian, David, and Cody. Maybe you can see Cody back there. This is a really special place, and you might not know how it's a special place because I kind of pan around and you just see woods behind me. But before the American Civil War, this was a plantation. And specifically where we're standing right now is an old slave cemetery. And there are well over 100 slaves buried out here with very little marking. And this place has been mostly forgotten about. And we're about to show it to you and tell you a little bit of the history of it. But it's incredible to stand out here in these woods and know that around me there's over 100 people buried, people who had names and people who lived a life that have all been forgotten about. And we're going to show it to you right now. Alright, so as we walk through these woods, I'm going to show you some of the graves out here. Here's one right here, and this area is just absolutely littered with them.
Yeah, they're everywhere. There's one right there.
And there's another one right there. Here's one. And here's another one.
They're really easy to spot.
And there's one. And here's one right here that sunk really far in. There's another one. As I pan up, there's 1, 2, and 3 more. And here's one. And here's a marker right here. This one looks a little bit more modern. So I don't know what that one is, but it's not marked, so there's no way of knowing. And it is a real shame that this historic cemetery that is forgotten about in the woods here. There's only one reason that I know it's here, and I'm going to show it to you in just a moment. But first, there's another grave right there, and another one. This one was probably a child's grave right here. It's a short one. And here's one, and another one. You can see these graves are literally right off the side of the road. Step over here as we walk. Here's the road where it's cut through right here. And just in these woods that you'd pass by and never know is a slave cemetery. It's really interesting to me that that's here, that this is, you know, 200-year-old history that's here and is just forgotten about. I don't know anything about the plantation that was here. I don't know when it started or whose it was or how many slaves they owned or anything like that. But you would never know. I mean, that there was anything here, except for one reason. And I'm going to show it to you, but not yet. Not yet. First, I'm going to show you around here, because this place is in danger of actually being destroyed because a logging company owns this land and the land around it, and they've cleared off the land. And I just spoke to someone not that long ago when I pulled up here who told me that if she had not been here the day that they were clear cutting out here, that this land actually would have been clear cut and this cemetery destroyed and probably completely lost. Let me show you the land. First of all, let me say I love this tree right here. And if you take a look out here, it's impossible to imagine all the history that's in this land that's just been lost and forgotten about. So now I'm going to show you why I know there's something here. I'm going to take a look at something really special. And it's something that I've seen before, because actually we're in an area that I grew up. And we used to drive down this road, you know, go hang out down a dirt road when I was growing up and that sort of thing. And you passed something and it was always a mystery. Didn't know why it was here or what this, you know, or the full history of this. But I know now, and I'm going to share it with you.
To have that many slaves, this had to have been a massive farm.
So driving by on winter days, you could just barely see this peeking out over the road. One lone tombstone. It reads, Samantha Street, born 1868, died January 23rd, 1918. And I also learned that beside this grave is her husband buried. And you can, I don't know if you can see it at all on video, but you can just barely see a mound right there. And he had a tombstone as well, but it went missing, unfortunately. So it's no longer there. There's no sign of that. There's only one lone tombstone. And I'm about to tell you some about Samantha Street that I learned from a friend of mine that knows a lot of history out in this area. So I'm sitting here beside Samantha Street's tombstone. And in just a moment, I'm going to read to you the history that I was actually sent by my pal Dan of this cemetery, and specifically some history of Samantha Street, tell you about her life. But before we begin, I want to point out that on her grave, Samantha Street was born a slave. And on her tombstone it says born 1868. And some of you might say, hey, that was after the war. Well, that's because the birth date on her tombstone was actually incorrect. So I'm about to tell you about Samantha Street, and I'm going to read it as it was sent to me. Mahone's Delight, which it says at the bottom of her grave. Mahone's Delight was an African-American benevolent fraternal lodge that existed in Waverly Hall in the early 1900s. A portion of the dues paid into the lodge, so I was told by a former member, went toward a life insurance policy and a grave marker, much like Woodmen of the World and Knights of the Pythias did at the same time. The Delight Lodge changed names numerous times over the years, at one time being called Knights of Moses. The female branch of the lodge was called the Chamber, and for the sake of the description, it was their version of the Order of the Eastern Star. The women wore long evening gowns to meetings, held Bible study, and helped raise money for things like furnishings or books for the local school for black children. The local lodge was named Mahone's because over 2/3 of the charter members were the local Mahone family. There are numerous headstones on African American graves around Waverly Hall and Tolbleton bearing this same lodge info. The birth date on Samantha Street's headstone is incorrect. It sounds as though someone was remembering her marriage date instead, which was 1867. Samantha Whitehead was born into slavery on the William Whitehead plantation, just a few hundred yards from where she rests today. After freedom, and beginning in 1870, she gave a different age on every census, probably because she did not know for certain, nor could she read or write. On the 1900 census, she gave her date of birth as December 1825. Her age is 74 and had been married 20 years. In 1910, she gave her age as 66 and had been married 40 years. At any rate, as a young woman, she was given by William Whitehead to his daughter, Catherine Whitehead Bodie. After freedom, Samantha legally married Hilliard Street, and they continued to live on the Bodie farm in Waverly Hall with their children. After Catherine Bodie moved to Atlanta, Samantha went to work for Catherine's niece, Mary James Pitts, as a mammy nurse to her children. One of those children was William I.H. Pitts. When he married and had children, Aunt Samantha, as she was called by them, became mammy nurse to his daughter, Mrs. Margaret Pitts. When Samantha died, Miss Margaret Pitts was 24 years old. Miss Margaret told me many times that she paid the delivery and setting fee for the grave marker, as well as one for Hilliard, who is buried beside his wife. He's buried right there. His grave marker disappeared long ago. From the 1870s until his death sometime after 1910, Hilliard Street was the porter, custodian, and night watchman of the I.H. Pitts & Sons Mercantile, Cotton Gin, and Warehouses. Miss Margaret, who died in 1998 at 104 years old, reminisced frequently about Samantha and the many things they did together. Uncle Hilliard and Aunt Samantha, as she referred to them, lived their long lives that stood in a house in Waverly Hall on Ridgeway Road. It is a pasture now, and a huge oak tree that grew in their front yard is still there. The cemetery where they are buried, the one that we're in right now, is called the Whitehead Sparks Cemetery. There are well over 100 unmarked graves there of Whitehead and Sparks slaves and some of their descendants. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit of history of Samantha and Hilliard over here. I certainly did, and this place is extremely special. I feel like it should be more remembered than it is.